I spent 3 days listening to this audiobook and I have thoughts. So we need to talk about The Intruder by Freida McFadden right now. Hey book bestie, welcome back to my channel. If I'm a new face to you, my name is Lauren, aka Lauren Page Reads over here on YouTube and also on Instagram and TikTok. If you love cozy bookish spaces and honest book reviews where you feel like you're just chatting with your bookish bestie, make sure you like this video and hit subscribe because I post new bookish videos for you to enjoy each and every week. And I'd love to have you be a part of my little corner. Today, we are going to be talking about The Intruder by Freida McFadden. I can't believe it, but this book is actually her third publication of 2025. I feel like we're all getting a little bit unsettled at this point. I listened to this audiobook in 3 days, like I said at the top of the video. The audiobook is only about 8 hours long and I was listening to it on 1.2 speed, so it ended up being like 6.5 hours. And like that reminded me just why her books are so bingeable, but I also finally put the nail on the head for why her books annoy me. So we're gonna get into all of that. Grab a blanket, let's get cozy and comfy and chat. Let me give you a quick synopsis so that we are all on the same page, and don't worry, this is a spoiler-free review. In The Intruder, we end up following Casey, who is a single woman in her mid-30s who is riding out a hurricane somewhere in New England on a remote property where she has a cabin that she's renting. The cabin is really run down and it doesn't seem like the roof is going to make it through the hurricane, and her closest neighbor is half a mile away. She's carrying a lot of emotional baggage at the moment, especially with the death of her dad in the past year, and it seems like she lost her teaching job as well in a pretty weird way, but she hasn't opened up about that yet. Finally, the storm hits and the cabin is cut off from the world. Everything is dark and tense, and just as Casey is sitting down to eat dinner, she notices some movement in her shed. Yep, her garden shed out back in the middle of a storm. Inside the shed is a teenage girl, and she is covered in blood. Something seems wrong here, right? Casey's a teacher and she really cares about kids and tries to see the best in them. Casey lets her into her house in the middle of this hurricane. From that moment, the book becomes super eerie. It's a closed-in story about survival, secrets, and what happens when somebody who seems vulnerable might actually be more dangerous than they let on. Big picture for me, this felt like a classic Freida book, but just slightly better than her average book that she publishes. This book lands pretty close to how I felt about Never Lie when I originally read that. I really enjoyed listening to it. The narrators were not like super awesome. The story did have that tendency to keep me hooked and being like, I just want to listen to like 5 more minutes. Let me find something else for me to clean so I can keep listening for 5 more minutes. The upside is my house is super tidy now. I'm not really complaining about that. The chapters are relatively short and the pacing kept the story moving just fine once you get into the meat of the story. And that is where I was finally able to put my finger on something that I've always felt about Freida's books, but I've never really been able to like say distinctly or say out loud. Okay? Prepare yourself. Her writing and style of narration in the books is essentially stream of consciousness. Whatever the main character is thinking, that is exactly what we are reading. If I am thinking in my head, I want to pick up this coffee cup. Oh, the coffee cup is hot. I wonder if the coffee is hot. Coffee is hot as well. That is literally what we are reading in Freida's books. That is what annoys me. You are telling, not showing. I think I hone on that like a lot in my book reviews, being like, this is the most important part to me. Did the writer show and not tell? Did the writer tell and not show? She tells through stream of conscious thought, doesn't show through actions. And it's frustrating, and I'm gonna say it. Even though I like reading Freida's books, her writing feels cheap. And it is okay that I like her books, and I can also say her writing feels cheap because I know what I'm getting out of her books. Do I wish her style would develop a little bit more? Yes. But if this is what her style is, I know what to expect in books. This technique of show, don't tell is usually attributed to Anton Chekhov. when he said this like really great writing advice of, don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light off broken glass. Okay, I'm gonna stop hashing on that and I'm gonna get back to my actual notes. I went on a very long tangent. I'm sorry, guys. It's okay that I've identified this because her books still feel like potato chips, and I feel better having like identified what it truly is. That makes me feel better going into her books rather than just being like, I don't know why her writing annoys me. You're just constantly in the character's head. It's really effortless to follow. This is going to sound rude. I think that's just why a lot of people like it. It truly is an escape, which reading should be an escape. It doesn't always have to be like a brain exercise where you have to like think really hard, and don't be mean to people who just want books that are easy to consume like potato chips. Those are perfectly fine. I have read almost all of Freida's books as well because I enjoy the mindless read every now and then. But the downside to this is that when everything is fed through a constant monologue of the character's head and their internal thoughts, the story honestly starts to feel claustrophobic and repetitive. Like, there were moments Casey did something and referred back to doing it again 3 more times. It's addicting and also exhausting, and it made me wonder about other things with Freida's books that I will not say on here. I'm sure you can connect the dots. If I had to describe the vibes of this book in 3 words, I would say eerie, teenage angst, we're hyphenating that, and somehow this book was hopeful and romantic. It's eerie because of the setting. The cabin is freaking falling apart. Casey is there in this cabin mysteriously because we don't really know what happened at her old job yet. It's the isolation, and it is the strange girl who she found in the shed. The teenage angst is layered in with the dual POV narration that's happening of a before time, but also the young character who comes into Casey's house and all of the messy emotions surrounding that. And then finally, the book is hopeful because underneath all this weirdness and tension, there's a thread of healing from the trauma that happened to some of the characters during their childhood, but also because of the romance that you could cheer on throughout the book. That part was probably my favorite. So obviously, yes, I'm a romance reader through and through. But then like the book ends on like the final thought of sometimes the people that you choose to be your family become more like family than the people that you share blood with are, which is just a beautiful sentiment to land on. Let's talk about Casey for a second. I feel like Freida did her dirty. She did her own character dirty, and I'm kind of upset about it. So I actually really enjoyed Casey. I was cheering for her. Even though Freida made her have a brain the size of a peanut, even when she didn't, like, I couldn't understand that part. I liked learning about the dynamic between Casey and her father. They seemed like they were really close, and he seemed like a really good guy. And that gave the story of the present more weight because it carried pieces of the past with it. While I loved Casey, there were moments that drove me up the wall with her, and it was because of how McFadden wrote her in this book. And I don't think it was fair. For some reason, she second guesses herself a lot. Like when her neighbor Lee comes over and is like, you shouldn't put X's on the window, that'll result in bigger shards. And Casey was like, I'm doing this because my dad did this in storms and he was smart with this type of stuff. And Casey's like, shrug, I guess you're right. I'm just going with whatever people say and not being like, well, my dad always did this and so I'm going to try it out. Worst case scenario, I do get a giant piece of glass stuck in my eye. Or I could get like a million little pieces of glass stuck in my eye. Which one's worse? Just wishy-washy moments. In the book, the moments with the gun where Casey was like, I took all these lessons, I learned blah, 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 blah. These moments just made it feel as if Freida was writing her to be clumsy and incompetent, purely to keep the plot moving rather than being true to the character. And it felt like she wasn't being true to the character and she was doing this to keep the plot moving, all because the story needed something dramatic to happen to make it seem scary. Because at the very end of the book, when you really look at all the details, you're like, that does not make sense for our girl. Like the feeling that I kept having in the present day moments, not the before moment, in the present day where Casey was in the cabin with this teenage girl, it was a feeling of, if this was real life, Casey would have handled this better, but the plot needs her to mess it up right now. And once you notice that, it is really hard to unsee it. And while it didn't ruin the story for me, it did pull me out of the story a lot, and I realized I was reading and listening to a book in those moments, which was really frustrating. And it was just like a lot of, oh my gosh, come on. Know your characters better, and maybe don't include certain details about your characters if you're not going to be true to them. Now, the girl who shows up at the house. For the sake of this, imagine you are renting a crappy cabin out in the middle of nowhere and a hurricane hits. And then a teenage girl comes into your tool shed. Alrighty, I guess I'd let her like maybe sleep on the porch. Nah, I'd let her come in, but it's a single bedroom cabin, right? Well, she's definitely having to sleep out on the couch. She should have been a little bit more prepared and not been like, yes, I'll allow the teenage girl to take up literally my entire house, and I'll give her the bedroom with access to everything that I own to it. All of my drawers that really should have been secured, and I should have logged in my head first and foremost. Yeah, maybe that makes me mean. I think that's one moment where Casey was like gullible and weird. Also, the teenage girl was spooky and covered in blood. As the story goes, her behavior starts to click a little bit more, and I wouldn't say it becomes less unsettling. You just understand her a little bit better, and honestly, you're kind of cheering for her. And this is something that I do appreciate. I appreciate a character who right off the bat, I'm like, what are you doing, crazy person? And then by the end of the book, I'm like, oh no, I like this one. Love those characters. Let's talk about pacing and atmosphere. The pacing was solid, nothing groundbreaking, but very dependable. What I really appreciated was that the story took place over literally a night or two, rather than a humongous period of time like some of Freida's other recent books from this year, like The Tenants. The hurricane, it did provide a lot of tension, and it amplified all of the feelings of being totally alone in the book. As far as the actual scare factor, this book was not scary. I give it a 1.5 out of 10. And I'm usually pretty honest, I'm usually a scaredy pants. This book was honestly more suspenseful and eerie than genuinely scary. It wasn't the kind of book that made me want to sleep with the lights on. It's okay if you're a scaredy cat. This book is for you. I really quickly do want to talk about some of my favorite moments in the book, and I'm going to keep it spoiler free. So if you've read the book, hopefully you get what I'm saying. And if you haven't read the book yet, just keep your eyes out for these moments. I really thought the moment with the group project assignment was the most pivotal part of the whole story and changed everything. And now that I look back on it, like that moment is my favorite. Honestly, when that happened, I was shopping at Costco on my lunch break. It was bonkers. But that's like when I felt the trajectory of the book shifting and everything kind of tilted in the way that it was supposed to go all along. And it gave me that little thrill of like, okay, finally we're getting somewhere with this story. Now we're on the right track and I can see kind of where we're ending up. Underneath all of the suspense, this book was really about childhood trauma, but it was pretty messy and it was really unhealthy how everybody dealt with their childhood trauma. And it was really about how those wounds of childhood shaped the decisions and choices that people make, and how teenagers probably are not the best people to be making decisions. It has a strong undercurrent of found family and how it can be more of a family than blood. These parts were quietly hopeful to me, even though the characters were making really questionable decisions, but I was like still cheering them on, right? Like I was cheering on the little romance. The twist. I'm not going to tell you the twist. Don't worry. Remember, spoiler free, and I'm a woman of my word. The first one, I did not see coming. I was elbow deep in doing my dishes on Saturday morning. When that first plot twist came, I was shocked. Shocked. Second plot twist, oh, I didn't actually guess it correctly. Like you had to wait until the very end of the book to fully get that plot twist. But I guessed the plot twist and I was pretty close. But I was in Target shopping for a bookshelf. Yes, I know, how meta. When that part came and I audibly went, oh my gosh. And like, it was pretty funny. The twist, they were satisfying, they weren't earth-shattering, but like that second twist, I was just like cheering on romance. Like, and honestly, at the end of the day, the plot twist made me go, okay, that was fun. That wasn't a total waste of my time. Would I recommend reading The Intruder? Yes, especially if you already like Freida McFadden's books. They're bingeable, you can read them in a weekend and feel good about yourself. They're suspenseful and slightly chaotic. And as long as you don't mind the characters making frustrating choices along the way, then I think this book would be a really fun read for you. If you're brand new to Freida, this also wouldn't be a horrible place to start. It gives you a good sense of her style and if you'll actually enjoy her other books or not. All right, book besties, so there is my spoiler-free review of The Intruder by Freida McFadden. If you've already read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, especially if you have that love-annoyance relationship with Freida's books like I do. Also, if you love cozy chats about thriller books, honest book reviews, and hanging out in this little corner with me, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe before you go. Clicking those buttons really supports the channel and helps our community grow. Thanks for spending time with me today, book bestie. And until next time, happy reading. Bye!